Hello students, my name is Miss Shaira. So today our lesson is about WPW syndrome, or also known as Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome. Our lesson today is divided by three parts: ECG examples, ECG criteria, and the conduction system of the heart. So let's get started. The conduction system of the heart is made up of specialized cardiac fibers, and it acts to initiate electrical cardiac impulses. These electrical activities can be recorded in an ECG. The first component of this conduction system is known as the sinoatrial node, also known as node of Keith or Fleck, situated at the right atrium wall just below the opening of superior vena cava. It is known as the pacemaker of the heart, as it initiates the contraction of the heart muscle about 60 to 100 beats per minute. Internodal atrial pathway are a specialized pathways in the atrial wall, and it acts to transmit impulse from SA node to AV node, and it consists of three components, which is the Bachmann, Wachenbach, and Thorel pathway. Atrioventricular node or AV node is known as the node of Tawara, and it is located at the lower part of the atrial septum nearby the AV valve. AV node conduct the impulse through the bundle of His, and it generates impulse about 40 to 60 beats per minute. AV node produces a delay about 0.11 second to allow blood to fully withdraw from atria into the ventricles before ventricular starts contracting. The third component is the bundle of His or AV bundle. It is located at the upper portion of intraventricular septum, and it connects to the right and left branches that conducts the impulses towards the apex of the heart and goes through the Purkinje fibers. Once the Purkinje fibers receives the impulse, it brings the impulse upward toward the ventricle walls, resulting to both of the ventricles to contract. Now let's refer to the ECG waveform. The firing of SA node is recorded in the ECG, known as the P wave. This stage is known as the atrial depolarization. The PR interval represents the delay, and the QRS complex represents the firing of AV node. Hence, it also represents the ventricular depolarization. Normal QRS complex is about 0.06 second to 0.12 second. And next, the ST segment. ST segment is the plateau in the myocardial action potential, and it is the period between the ventricular depolarization and ventricular repolarization. It lies in the isoelectrical line. The T wave marks the ventricular repolarization, where ventricles are relaxed. The cycle here is repeated and producing a one cardiac cycle. Moving on to our part 2 of today's lesson, which is identifying the WPW ECG criteria. So starting with the delta waves. So delta waves will always have an association appearing as a slit delta wave. So our third ECG criteria is a short PR interval with less than 0.12 second. And the fourth ECG criteria is that in WPW syndrome, there will be a broad QRS complex. And moving on to our fifth ECG criteria, which is the ST segment and T waves discordant changes. Okay, so as we all know, there are two types of WPW syndrome, type A and type B. For type A, it is much likely common, and there will be an appearance of tall R waves in V1 and V2. Meanwhile, for type B, it is less common, where there is an association of negative R waves with delta waves in V1 and V2. So that's all for ECG criteria that we must take note before interpreting during an interpretation of ECG. So now that we have discussed the ECG criteria, let's take a look of the few examples of WPW syndrome. So to determine either this ECG is a sinus rhythm, you can see there is a PQRST wave along the long lead 2. So this is a sinus rhythm with a regular rhythm, and we can automatically calculate the rate by dividing 300 over 4. We can get 75 beats per minute as the rate. The normal axis deviation are normal with positive deflection in lead 1 and AVF, and the P waves here are all appeared normal in long lead 2. However, there is a short PR interval in this long lead 2 ECG with 3 small boxes which indicates 0.12 second. Hence, this is a short PR interval. There is also a broad QRS complex in this ECG in V1, V2, V3, and there is no ST elevation. However, there is an ST depression in V1, V2, and V3. The T waves here are all normal, so these are all normal T waves. So now we are going to see the WPW criteria. So the first criteria is slit delta waves. So as you can see here, there is a slit delta waves here, which means it is a WPW criteria. And as we discussed just now, there is also a short PR interval with broad QRS complex. So how to determine either this WPW is a type A or type B? So as we all see here, we can see here in V1, V2, there is a tall R waves and it is positively deflected. That means this is a type A. Now let's take a look with our second ECG example here by determining this is actually a sinus rhythm with a PQRST wave along the long lead 2 with a regular rhythm, and the rate here is 75. We can determine it by dividing 300 over 4. Next is the axis deviation. Both of these axis deviation here is positively deflected, so whereby this is a normal axis deviation with a normal P wave. So here is the normal P wave morphology. However, when we look at the PR interval here, there is a short PR interval. So this is actually a very short PR interval, less than 0.12 second. And there is also a broad QRS complex. So as we can see here in V1, there is a notch broad QRS complex. Also in long lead 2, this is a morphology of a broad QRS complex. Also here in V5, V6, V2. And there is actually no ST elevation. And slightly an ST depression here in V2 and V3. The T waves here are all normal. So now let's take a look at the WPW criteria. As you can see here, the arrows here indicates the slit delta waves, and as we have discussed just now, this ECG here has a short PR interval with a broad QRS complex here. As you can see here, there is a notch broad QRS complex. So how to determine either this WPW is a type A or type B by looking at the R wave. Either it is tall or it is deep R wave in V1 and V2. So as you can see here, this V1 here, there is a positively deflected R wave. Okay, and in V2, there is a tall R wave. Hence, this is a type A WPW. So our last ECG example here indicates a sinus rhythm with a PQRST wave along the long lead 2, and the rhythm here is regular with a 50 beats per minute rate, and there is also a left axis deviation where lead 1 here is positively deflected, which is a left axis deviation. The P waves here, as you can see, this is a very small P wave, however it is considered as a normal P wave. And okay, so next here we can take a look at the PR interval. So the PR interval here is actually very short. Okay, and as we can see here, there is actually a very clear view of a broad QRS complex here. Here also have a broad QRS complex, and there is actually an ST elevation here in lead 3, in lead V1, and also AVF here. There is an ST elevation, and also there are tall T waves here in lead 1, in AVL, and V1 to V6 have tall R wave. Okay, so now let's take a look at the slit delta waves. So here in V1, V2, V3 until V6, we can see a slit delta waves also in lead 1. And just now we discussed that this ECG here has a short PR interval with broad QRS complex. So the broad QRS complex is actually very obvious. So how to determine either this ECG is this WPW syndrome ECG is a type A or type B by looking at the R waves. So as you can see here, there is a deep R wave, and this in V1 and V2, which it is negatively deflected. Therefore, when there is a negatively deflected of deep R wave, we can automatically indicate that this is a type B WPW syndrome. So that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Before we wrap up our workshop for today, let us recap some of the main ECG criteria for WPW. That includes the slit delta wave, the short PR interval, and broad QRS complex. Not to forget also types of WPW syndrome, type A and type B. Here I have prepared an ECG exercise for you. My name is Ms. Syaira binti Abdul Malik, and that's the end of our ECG workshop for today. And good luck, students.